I'm opening this video with the topic of family and animals because the rest of the video is part one of two videos. So there will be a part two of a conversation I had recently with Peter. So keep watching to find out who Peter is. And the funny thing was that we had planned to talk about something entirely different. We had planned to talk about a trip to York. We'd planned to talk about all kinds of things, but when we sat down and started talking, well, the topics that just came up organically were so compelling for both of us that we just went with it, and the result is what you'll see in the conversation that follows. But for now, be ready to practice listening to British English as we explore different topics, including names, England's geography, and of course, favorite animals, sprinkled with vocabulary, geography, English culture, and much more. Enjoy. So here we are with Pete, and Peter, you and I know each other because two of our four grandparents were the same people. So basically, we are cousins because your mother and my father were brother and sister. They were siblings. And the way life is, your mother stayed in the UK and married your father, and you grew up in England. And my father stayed in Latin America, married my mother, and I grew up in Latin America. But we are first cousins. So the first thing I want to say is thank you so much for doing this and welcome.
Thank you.
Let's speak a little bit about your name, Peter, because that's a very interesting name. Well, we can see that it's spelled P-E-T-A and that you're a woman, but that exact same name in terms of pronunciation would normally be given to a male, P-E-T-E-R. But in English from the UK, there's no difference in pronunciation. So it's Peter and Peter. But in the US, there would be a difference in pronunciation. It would be Peter, you, and Peter, Peter with a R sound for the male. But so let's talk a little bit about your name.
Sure. So I'm the eldest of three. So my mother, as you rightly say, is the sister to your father. And I'm the eldest of three girls. And before I was born, they were convinced I was going to be a boy. So I was always going to be called Peter, P-E-T-E-R. So when I inconveniently arrived as a girl, I find this quite horrifying now because I actually didn't have a name for 2 whole days, which I think is outrageous. I was a nobody because they didn't know what to call me because I was going to be a boy. So it turned out that my father's stepmother came out with the bright idea of, well, call her Peter anyway and just spell it slightly differently. So they thought this was a great idea. And here I am. And I must say now, as an older person, I love my name. I love the difference that it brings, the fact that once people get to know me, because it's quite unusual even now, once people get to know me, they struggle to reduce it to Pete. So in England, all the male Peters, their names get shortened to Pete, but most people just can't bring themselves to do that to me unless they're my actual friends and family who are so used to me that the name is Pete. So yes, as a child, it was difficult actually because we used to move a lot. I was quite gawkish as a child. I was very tall, very skinny. I was called Peter. I had a brace. It was all, awful when you're all these things you don't want. You just want to hide behind a tree. So to be honest, to be called Peter was just horrific. But here I am now, and I love it. So now as an older person, I love having an unusual name, I must say. I mean, I've sort of had a bit of a laugh over the years because even though I am a girl, my voice is quite deep for a female. So in the days when I used to be on the telephone for work, where I'd have to phone people up and talk to them in my job, I'd say, "Oh, hello, my maiden name was Foster, now it's Adamson." So I'd say, "Oh, hello, I'm Peter Foster." And they'd all think I was a guy. So
Sure.
I found myself sort of talking higher and higher and higher because it's a bit like when you meet posh people, you sort of start talking ever so poshly. It's ridiculous. Do this, you don't mean to, but yeah. So yeah, on the whole, I'm very happy to have an unusual name.
Awesome. And when it comes to accent, this is something that my students ask me a lot about, which is, what's the English accent? And it's hard to explain that there are lots of English accents, and there's a spectrum even in London from very posh, the Queen's English, to estuary Cockney English, which is the East End of London. And I don't know how those two accents, how they understand each other. I find it difficult sometimes to understand the Cockney accent. But yours is a very clear accent. So how would you categorize your own accent?
I would categorize mine as pretty typical. If I wasn't English and I was going to listen to someone speaking English, I would expect to hear me speak.
Exactly.
I've got some of my younger friends tease me and call me posh. I'm not posh at all, but I do speak quite nicely. My parents spoke quite nicely, not Queen nicely, but nicely.
Right.
We didn't come from an area in the country where there was an accent. And I guess, I don't know actually if this is true in other countries. It'd be interesting to find out. But for such a small country, we've got counties. So we have different counties all over the country. I don't know how many there are. Let's say there are, I'm going to say 40, maybe not that many. But actually, the more I think about it, the more I think there are different accents in each county in the whole country. Some are very, very slightly different to the way I'm speaking now. Others are so different that you like, sorry, could you just say that again?
Exactly.
We've also, of course, within the United Kingdom, got Irish, Scottish, Welsh, and English. And even within Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, they have different dialogues of their strong accent. So, quite frankly, how anybody can speak or learn how to speak English is to me highly commendable, because it must be impossible, because depending on who you're speaking to will depend on what comes out of their mouths.
And that's just in the UK, in Great Britain. But many people who are learning English, even at advanced levels, they're speaking with people in the US, in Canada, in Australia, in different countries, and in England. And it's a thing, the question of pronunciation. But yes, definitely you have very clear received pronunciation, which is the clearest kind of British English that there is. And that's what people say to me about my English. And so it makes me happy to know that my cousins have, well, I wouldn't say a similar accent, because also obviously mine is very Americanized because I live on this side of the world. Okay.
It's interesting how one language, the English language, can have so many different ways of saying it. The Australians, they speak in a completely different way. It can't be easy to learn. So well done to your students.
Okay, so the topic of this conversation is to speak about life in the English countryside. And you are such, how can I say this, a special example of life in the English countryside, because most people who travel to the UK, either on business or, as learners, They're mostly going to the cities. They're going to London, to Liverpool, to Manchester, and they have no opportunity of interacting with people like
Yeah.
you who live in the countryside, so not in a big city.
England's quite a small country, and again, as I alluded to before with our different counties, in the old days, the counties would have their county town, but where we live in the southeast of England, and we are only 30 miles away from London, which is nothing. So it's actually probably about the most expensive part of the country, apart from central London itself, that we could be in, because we are only 30 miles from London. So we used to be rural, but we're not anymore because it's been built up over the years. So it's commuter belt, I suppose, for people to go into either the bigger towns or certainly central London. However, we do have green belt on our doorstep as well, which is why it's quite an expensive area within the country. Now, your students may or may not have heard of the town Ascot in England, because it's where we have a very famous summer racing meeting where the Queen used to host the week's event in June every year, where she'd come in carriages all the way down the track, and then there'd be a whole day's festivities of horse racing that would go on for a whole week. Now, of course, since her passing, it's now the King. But it's very, I think most people who have heard of England have probably, if not heard of Ascot, they've certainly heard of Windsor, which is just round the corner from Ascot. So these are all places near us. And in fact, we used to live in Ascot when I first got married. And I've got 2 grown-up boys now, but when we had the boys, they were born in Ascot. So I used to travel quite a bit for work in my younger days, and people abroad would say, "Oh, where do you live?" And I'd just say Windsor, because it was easier to say that in England, and they all used to think I'd actually met the Queen.
You live in Windsor
Yes.
Castle.
I know, and of course, it's just Windsor Castle is like a fairy tale castle, and even I know how lucky and privileged we are to live near somewhere so beautiful. And we live near here and near that castle, and we used to live walking distance from the racecourse where the royal meeting happened every June. They actually have lots of meetings all the year round, but that formal one in June is the one that the Queen and now the King presides over. And when we first moved there, my husband and I would walk there after work and watch the last race. And then when the children were born, we pushed them sort of on their pushchairs over there. And it was all actually quite free and easy. Obviously, roll on to 2023. And of course, you can't do that now. It's all quite corporate. All the area that we used to sit and have picnics and watch the horses, that is now very corporate and it's very expensive. But yes, I've got very fond memories of the ability to be able to just wander around. And in actual fact, as a younger person, I was probably in my 20s, we went racing one year, and the Queen and the Queen Mother just walked past us like normal pedestrians. And
Right.
Jeff and I went, "Good Lord, that was the Queen." No, we went like this. "Good Lord, that was the Queen," because she's tiny and we're tall. Honestly, it was just incredible. So, and now the present day, the nice thing about living where we live is we are near to the city, but we consider ourselves to be in the countryside. I'm now retired. I don't work anymore. As I said, my children have grown up. So I live a very pleasant life, not working. I have a dog, and there's some fantastic places to walk the dog. I'm also lucky enough to have a horse, and there's some fantastic places to ride my horse.
Yes, so that's where I was going to, sorry to interrupt, but I was just going to jump in there. So this question of Ascot and the horse racing and living near Windsor Castle, you just said that you're lucky enough to own a horse. Tell us the horse story, please.
Oh dear. Okay, so I'm going to say 52 years old when I decided I wasn't going to be doing the job I was doing anymore. I needed a bit of a break. And as a child, I had ridden horses basically until boys came along. I rode horses. So I got to 13 or 14 or whatever and stopped riding horses. I never owned one. I just went to a sort of pony club. So roll on to when I got to about 52 years of age, and I went on I just stopped working, and I went on a trek on the western coast of Ireland, which I discovered about this trek some months before, and I'd always wanted to do it. And so I took myself off, just myself. None of my family ride horses, so I was the only one that was interested in this. And I went to Galway, which is a fantastic town on the west coast of Ireland. It's the best fun you'll ever have, ever, anywhere. And I was met by an old guy called Paddy in a threadbare jumper who picked me up in the school bus and took me to a field. This was a Sunday morning. And there in that field were some other random people that this other guy, Willie, had rounded up. And we all just had to go and choose a horse to ride for a week, all the way down the Connemara coast of Ireland. So we had the most incredible week. We stayed in a different pub every night. The Irish people are the most hospitable, fun, funny, hilarious, warm-hearted race of people you'll ever meet. So I had the best time ever. I rode this horse called Maria every single day for about 7 hours. It was just incredible. The scenery was so beautiful. There were some bits that we rode on that humans had never walked on. It was just utterly stunning. And at the end of the week, I had a conversation with Willie, who was the guy that took this ride, and just said, so what do people do when they buy horses normally then? And he said, oh, they just sort of see an advert and go and buy it, and then usually it doesn't work out. So I said, so I've just ridden this horse for a whole week. I'd swum in the sea on her. I went up and down 2 mountains on her. I mean, if ever you're going to test drive something, that was the way to do it. And so I bought her. And I live in Camberley in Surrey. I don't live in leafy Connemara in Ireland. So I got home and thought, even by my standards, this is completely ridiculous. Of course, I can't have a horse. What on earth am I? I didn't have any horse equipment. I didn't know where to put her. I had no clue. But I did it. And he was gorgeous. He just said, if it doesn't work out, I'll have her back. So I just madly tried to learn how on earth, what did you do with them? Where did you put them? How much is this going to cost? I don't know. And I did. I just threw myself into it. My husband was very supportive, which was just as well. When I actually broke it to him that I'd bought a horse, he just rolled his eyes and said, oh, well, I sort of knew you always would. So now, 12 years later, here I am, and I'm still riding my horse. I'm now 65, or nearly 65. And, it's just, I'm so privileged and lucky to still be able to do that.
We have some footage of Maria, and of course it's not just you who rides her now. It's your son also, who has now kind of adopted her, right? This footage that you sent me, you can just ride anywhere, right? Is that what you were?
In the old days, when I was a child, you could ride just about anywhere. But of course, we've got many more people now. And because we live so near London, a lot of the land has been gobbled up into houses and roads and infrastructure over the years compared to when I was a child. So when I was a child and I'd go riding, we have things called bridleways. And a bridleway is basically like a footpath, but for horses. So as a dog walker or a normal everyday walker, or maybe you're on your bicycle or something, the bridleway, if you saw a sign saying bridleway, you can go down it even now. They still exist. There aren't that many of them, but they do still exist. You can go down the bridleway, but you do have to watch out because chances are a horse is going to come along. And they're still there. I mean, we've still got lots of lovely wooded areas that we can go to. I'm a bit of a mad older person. I like to jump, for example. I like jumping on her, which a lot of people don't like to do, but I like doing that. But I'll always do it for fun.
So that's Maria. I love the name Maria for your horse, and it's very Okay, so that was part 1 of my conversation with Pete. We intended to just speak for a little bit. Like I say, we were going to talk about other things, but then we just we just got carried away. And so this is a part 1, and I'll see you for part 2, where we speak about more animals next week. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give me a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and remember to explore the links in the description box about my ongoing English training program, as well as my free 30-page guide, How to Revolutionize Your English, with audio filled with tips, strategies, and suggestions that you can put into practice straight away. So I'll see you next week. Take very good care until then. Bye for now.